All right, welcome everyone. We are diving deep today into learning.
Learning how to learn, to be precise.
Yeah, how to learn better. Based on, well, a ton of stuff, really. Articles, research, even some notes I jotted down.
And we'll synthesize it all, pull out the most important and maybe even surprising insights.
That's the mission, to give you a crash course in, well, your own brain.
Because honestly, it applies to everything. Want to get better at work, pick up a new hobby, even master that tricky video game, it all comes down to this.
Totally. And two people who really cracked this code are Barbara Oakley and Terrence Sejnowski.
The learning how to learn folks. Wrote the book, created the course.
Which, by the way, over 2.4 million students have taken. That's huge. Worldwide.
It shows you how much we all crave this knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And what they teach, it's not just theory, it's backed up by real science. Brain stuff, cognitive psychology.
What got me reading the foreword was how passionate they are about reaching younger learners. Because even if a kid's school isn't great or they don't have the best support at home, this stuff is like self-help for your brain. Gives them power.
It really does. And it's amazing how they've taken the adult material and made it work for kids. Videos, a youth course, and this book we're diving into. They use analogies and stories that make it so easy to grasp.
And it's been translated into so many languages, too. Clearly, this stuff matters everywhere. So buckle up. We're about to unlock some seriously practical techniques.
Backed by science, of course. Ready to upgrade your learning game.
I am. So first things first. How does our brain actually learn?
Well, it turns out it's not just one way of thinking. Neuroscience tells us there are two main modes: focused and diffuse.
Okay, so focused mode. That's probably what most people think of when they picture studying, right? You're concentrating hard, solving a math problem, giving a presentation, maybe even learning a new dance move. Your brain's really zeroed in.
Exactly. Certain areas are firing away like crazy. But then there's diffuse mode. This is more relaxed, more mind-wandering.
Daydreaming, doodling, taking a walk, even just spacing out in the shower.
It seems unproductive, but actually different parts of your brain are lighting up, and that's when those aha moments can happen.
Because in diffuse mode, you're making connections you wouldn't normally see. It's like the book's analogy. Focus mode is eyes on the prize, while diffuse mode is eyes on the flies.
I love that analogy. Really captures it. And to illustrate this even further, the sources use this brilliant pinball machine analogy.
Yeah, so with focus mode, imagine the pinball machine's bumpers are really close together. The ball, it's bouncing around rapidly but in a limited area.
Following the same well-worn paths, the ones you already know. But in diffuse mode, imagine those bumpers are spread way out. The pinball, your thought, has more space to roam. It can make new, unexpected connections. It's like when you're stuck on a problem, you walk away, do something else, and suddenly the solution pops into your head.
That's diffuse mode at work. And here's the thing. Your brain can't be in both modes at the same time. It's constantly switching back and forth.
So how do we do that consciously? Well, focused mode, that's easy. You just direct your attention to the task.
But diffuse mode, that's trickier. You need to relax, let your mind wander, go for a walk, take a shower, listen to music.
Even sleeping can help. Your brain's still working things out in the background.
And what's really cool is that when you're stuck on a problem, switching to a completely different activity, even briefly, can trigger that diffuse mode problem solving in the background. Like switch from studying math to reading a history book.
Give your brain a chance to breathe. And activities like sleep and exercise, they really boost that diffuse mode problem solving power.
Now, I know what some people are thinking. What if I'm just plain stuck? Like, no amount of focus is helping.
Well, the sources talk about two main scenarios. One is you just haven't grasped the basics yet. Diffuse mode can't help if you don't have the foundation. So you need to go back, review your notes, maybe ask for clarification.
Right. The second scenario is you've put in the effort, you understand the basics, but you're still hitting a wall.
That's when you need to step away and let diffuse mode take over. Take a break, do something else, and come back later.
And a practical tip here is to tackle your toughest subjects first thing in the day.
That way, your diffuse mode has all day to work on those tricky concepts in the background.
The sources even suggest ideal break lengths, around 5 to 6 minutes, just enough to disengage without losing momentum. Which, by the way, this whole idea of alternating focus and breaks.
It's like a preview of the Pomodoro technique. We'll get to that later.
But for now, the takeaway is, effective learning is a balance between focused effort and letting your mind wander.
Now let's zoom in on the brain itself. How do those aha moments actually happen?
It all comes down to neurons and synapses. those tiny connections that make up your thoughts and memories.
And the sources use this fun analogy. Imagine neurons as friendly space aliens. They have a central eye, which is the nucleus.
And branching legs, called dendrites, covered in tiny spikes. And an arm, called an axon, that reaches out to connect with other neurons.
So these aliens, they talk to each other by sending electrical signals, like little shocks from one alien's arm to another's leg.
And that gap between them, that's the synapse.
And here's where learning happens. Every time those neurons fire together, the connection strengthens. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Right, exactly. And these strengthened connections, we can think of them as brain links. When you learn something new, you're creating new brain links, but they're weak at first.
Practice is what makes them stronger. The more you use them, the more neurons get involved, and the synapses get more efficient.
Like a path in the forest. The more you walk it, the clearer and easier it becomes.
And if you don't use a path, it gets overgrown and disappears. Same with brain links. Use it or lose it.
That mice in the forest analogy really brings it to life.
And then there's neuroplasticity.
That's the brain's amazing ability to change and grow new connections throughout your entire life.
So even if you think you're bad at something, your brain can actually rewire itself to get better. It's constantly adapting.
And sleep is a crucial part of this. Research by Guang Yang shows that when you learn something new during the day, these tiny sprouts appear on the dendrites.
But they don't fully develop until you sleep. That's when they turn into dendritic spines and form new synapses. It's like your brain is practicing what you learned while you're asleep.
So sleep is not just about resting, it's an active part of learning. And it's why pulling all-nighters is actually counterproductive.
You're robbing your brain of the chance to solidify those new connections. And what's also interesting is that these new spines only grow when you're really focused.
If you're distracted, your brain's not going to build those connections as effectively.
And on the flip side, if you don't use those connections, they get pruned away. It's like the brain has its own cleaning crew. Which explains why you might understand something in class but then forget it later.
Because you haven't reinforced those connections. You need to review and practice regularly. But of course, there's one big obstacle that often gets in the way of learning.
Procrastination. We all know it too well.
It's like a universal struggle. And the sources explain that it's actually rooted in our brains.
Our brains are wired to avoid things that seem unpleasant or difficult. When we think about doing something we dread, a part of our brain called the insular cortex lights up.
It's the same area that processes physical pain. So it's like our brains are telling us, this is going to hurt, avoid.
But here's the thing. That feeling usually fades after about 20 minutes of actually starting the task.
So the hardest part is just getting over that initial hump.
And that's where the Pomodoro technique comes in.
Yes, this is a game changer. It was developed by Francesco Cirillo, and it's named after those tomato-shaped kitchen timers.
The idea is simple. You work on a task for 25 minutes, then take a short break. And you repeat that cycle.
And during those 25 minutes, you eliminate distractions. Phone goes off, notifications silenced, everything. You're just focused on the task.
And it's not about finishing the entire task in those 25 minutes. It's about making consistent, focused progress.
And those breaks are crucial. They give your brain a chance to rest and switch to diffuse mode.
The sources suggest writing down any distracting thoughts that pop up during your work session. That way you can deal with them later without interrupting your flow.
And for your break, do something completely different from your work task. Get up and move around, listen to music, step outside for a few minutes.
Anything that helps your brain recharge.
And there are even apps that can help you with the Pomodoro technique, like Forest, where you plant a virtual tree that grows while you work. If you get distracted and leave the app, your tree dies. It's a fun way to stay motivated.
And one more important point, single tasking is key. Multitasking might seem efficient, but it actually makes you less productive overall.
Right, it's like trying to juggle too many balls at once. You end up dropping them all.
So we've got the Pomodoro technique for focused work. But what about those unconscious habits that can sabotage our learning?
Those zombie habits.
Exactly. They're like automatic programs running in the background, steering us towards goals, good or bad, without us even realizing it.
And some of those habits are helpful, like automatically brushing your teeth before bed.
But others, like constantly checking your phone, can really hinder our learning. The good news is we can reprogram those habits.
It takes effort and consistency, but it's possible. Like if you have a scroll through social media every 5 minutes, zombie habit, you can train to put your phone in another room while studying the zombie habit to take its place.
And to really drive home the dangers of procrastination, the sources use this stark but effective analogy. Arsenic eaters.
Small doses of arsenic might seem harmless at first, but they build up over time and eventually become deadly.
Same with procrastination. Those little delays and distractions might seem insignificant in the moment, but they add up and sabotage our progress in the long run. So we need to be vigilant and nip them in the bud.
And one of the most powerful tools we have for fighting procrastination and strengthening our learning is active recall.
This is all about actively retrieving information from your memory. It's much more effective than just passively rereading notes or textbooks.
The key is to force your brain to work for the information. So here's how it works. First, you do a quick picture walk through the material to get an overview.
Then read it carefully, section by section.
But after each section, look away from the material and try to recall the main points. Say them out loud, write them down, or draw a mind map.
The goal is to pull the information out of your brain, not just push it in.
And it's helpful to practice this recall in different locations and at different times, waiting for the bus, standing in line, even lying in bed before you go to sleep.
The more varied the context, the stronger the memory will become.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding how our brains work to practical techniques for overcoming procrastination and boosting our memory. And it's always inspiring to see how these principles play out in real life.
Absolutely. And one of the most compelling examples in the sources is the story of Santiago Ramon y Cajal, the father of modern neuroscience.
He's considered a genius, but his path to success was anything but straightforward. He actually struggled a lot in school, especially with math.
He was more interested in art, actually, which didn't go over well with his strict father, who was a doctor. He even got into some serious trouble for building a homemade cannon.
That sounds a bit dangerous.
It was. It blew a hole in a neighbor's door. But eventually, his father found a way to spark his interest in medicine. He took him to anatomy labs, even to graveyards to see cadavers. Very hands-on approach.
That's one way to make anatomy come alive.
It worked. Kyle decided to pursue medicine, but he had to relearn all that math and science he had struggled with. He had to build those neural pathways from scratch.
And it wasn't easy. He even failed a crucial exam twice before finally passing. But he was persistent.
And his detailed drawings of neurons became foundational to modern neuroscience.
But here's what's really inspiring. Cajal didn't consider himself a genius. He was open about his struggles, his speech impediment, his forgetfulness.
His story shows that you don't have to be born brilliant to achieve great things. It's about effort, dedication, and the willingness to retrain your brain.
And this brings up some common excuses people make for not trying these learning techniques, like I just don't have the time.
But even short bursts of focused effort, like Pomodoro sessions, can make a huge difference.
Or, I'm just not creative or imaginative. But the sources point out that children are naturally imaginative, and we can all cultivate that ability.
Another one is, what I'm learning is useless. But even learning seemingly useless things can keep your mind sharp and flexible.
And then there's the teacher or the material is just so boring. But the responsibility is on us, the learners, to make it interesting, to find connections, create stories, make it relevant to our lives.
Exactly. And the sources even suggest trying to come up with your own metaphors and analogies for challenging concepts. It's a great way to solidify your understanding.
So the bottom line is, anyone can improve their learning abilities. It just takes the right strategies and a willingness to put in the work. And speaking of personal learning journeys, the sources share another inspiring story. Alistair McConville, one of the book's authors, who decided to learn chemistry alongside his students as an adult.
What's interesting is that he had avoided science his whole life, thought it was too hard, not for him.
Kind of like Barbara Oakley with math.
But he wanted to understand the world better, and he also wanted to experience learning from a student's perspective to become a better teacher.
And his students were amazing. They supported him, helped him, even quizzed him.
It was this awesome role reversal. And Alistair put all the learning techniques we've talked about into practice. Pomodoro, spaced repetition, active recall, creating his own wacky analogies.
Like his image of a white Porsche crying a lot to remember Cryolite.
Exactly. And he put in a lot of work. Adult learners have to make sacrifices. But he ended up passing the chemistry exam.
And more importantly, he gained a deeper understanding of what it's like to be a student struggling with a new subject.
Which is a reminder that we should all support our teachers and parents in their learning journeys. It can really bring us closer together.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into learning how to learn, the key takeaway is this. You have the power to learn effectively and continuously improve your learning skills.
We've uncovered some powerful tools today. Focused and diffuse thinking, the importance of sleep, the Pomodoro technique, active recall, and the incredible potential of neuroplasticity.
And as a final thought, I want to leave you with this. Think about one area in your life where you've felt stuck. Maybe you've hit a plateau in your career, or you've always wanted to learn a new language, but never seemed to make progress.
Now, consider how just one of the techniques we've discussed today could make a difference. Could you try a Pomodoro session to finally get started on that project you've been putting off? Or could you consciously switch to diffuse mode when you hit a roadblock?
I encourage you to experiment, see what works for you, because learning how to learn is a lifelong journey.
And this deep dive has only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore. If you're curious, we highly recommend checking out the sources we've mentioned and continuing your own learning adventure. The possibilities are truly endless.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, happy learning.
Bye.